Welcome to Oh Hell No with Nicole.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Oh Hell No podcast. Today we have Ben Cort, who is an author, and we are going to discuss his new book. It's Weed Inc., The Truth About THC, the Pot Lobby, and the Commercial Marijuana Industry. Welcome, Ben. Thank you for being here.
Oh, this is my pleasure, Nicole. Thanks so much for having me.
Yes, absolutely. So I read your book, and I want to start by asking you, how would you describe yourself as a teen?
Well, first off, I would not describe myself when I was a teen as someone who would ever have been introduced as an author. It's still a bit of a trip. You know, I go to these book fairs and I do media things and and whenever somebody says I'm an author, it still kind of gets me a little bit because, yeah, I guess as a teen, I was sort of the kind of guy who wasn't supposed to make it at all. I barely made it out of high school after I got sober in high school, and I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to help anybody. I didn't want to be a part of anything that wasn't directly serving exactly what I wanted to do. And I don't know, I was a punk. I was just a punk kid who got into a lot of trouble and ended up developing a pretty significant addiction to drugs and alcohol by the time I was 16 years old.
Wow. So it's safe to say that you did not have any career goals as a young adult because you were just doing some other things.
So I guess from a career goal standpoint, and listen, I don't know what kind of rating you try and keep on the show or anything, so I didn't have any goals of being alive. I mean that in all sincerity and honesty. Like when some of the kids, maybe who were a little better off than I was, would get kind of talking about college plans or future plans of getting married, or there was just a block for me. Like I had no intention of ever like seeing 18, let alone 19, let alone 20. And, you know, the way you get through that sort of thing is you just don't think about it. So, no, I mean, I had absolutely no career goals. I didn't even really have distinguished goals about staying alive at that point. It was Washington, D.C. in the mid-90s.
Mm-hmm. But you know what? That's real. And that's what I love about talking to my guests. Everybody is different. And, I mean, look at you now. So, I mean, it's amazing. So how do you remember how you got into using drugs? Do you remember, like, what happened?
Yeah, I remember really well. You know, I actually just did all the other crazy things. So I got to do a TED Talk about this like 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago. And so I went back and I tried to write all that stuff down and tried to remember the how and the why and the where. And, you know, when I left Colorado for DC when I was 12 years old, like it was just terrifying. You know, I was a kid who grew up in Boulder who found himself in a pretty intense urban environment, and I didn't have any idea who I was, what to do with myself, how to carry myself, how to move through the world. And I think at first there was definitely just a longing for friendship and for some sort of companionship that you get pretty instantly when you get high. Mm-hmm. And then I think the other side to it was I have so much addiction inside of my family, and my folks had always told me, like, this is something you should never mess with. It'll probably hit you pretty quick if you do. And so it was just kind of this perfect storm of, man, I didn't know who I was, and I didn't know who I could hang out with, and it seemed like getting high solved all of those problems for me. It did solve all those problems for a minute.
Yeah, because you didn't think about them, right?
Right, exactly. You know, when you got a brain that never stops and it's always yelling at you about being no good and not having the right anything to make it, and you get to shut that brain off for a minute. Like, it's great. It's fantastic while it lasts.
Yeah. Did you just smoke weed, or did you do like drugs?
Oh, I did. Well, listen, I'm going to bust you a little bit on this because this is part of the problem. I meet a lot of guys, especially in today's world, who they're like, man, I went to get help, or I went to treatment, or whatever. And they were like, oh, you don't do drugs, you just smoke weed. Like, it's a for real drug, and especially today. But while weed was definitely a big part of my life, it was a daily part of my life. I use everything that I could possibly find. What we call it in the field now is a polysubstance abuser. And that means that my drug of choice was more. Anything I could get, I just wanted some more of it. Anything I could do to change my mood, I just wanted some more of it.
Oh, okay. So what made you wake up and decide to change your life?
I had some friends. I had some guys who were, as close as brothers, and who had gotten sober and who loved me enough to kind of keep on pushing me until I could get there. And one of them in particular, my buddy Mike, he really challenged me to, we took a trip every year. We got in the car and we drove down south from Washington down to North Carolina. And he said, I'm not going with you if you get high. And he pushed and pushed and pushed until I agreed. And something about having a couple of days clean let me see that there was more out there that I wanted. And, at that point I'd gone to 12-step for almost 2 years. It was all court ordered and mandated by the judge. Mm-hmm. And so I knew where to go and I knew what to do. I just hadn't ever wanted it before that. It was that week, actually the night before we left on that trip, which was June 15th, 1996, was last time I ever put anything in my body to change my mood.
Wow, that's amazing.
Aside from caffeine and sugar and stuff, I guess.
Yeah, that doesn't count. So when did you realize that you wanted to work at a drug and alcohol treatment program, or work for, or start? Because you did that too. You started a program with someone else, but you also, do this for a living. So when did you realize that that's what you wanted to do?
So I didn't have this, I never felt like it was anything that I wanted to do professionally. I had always separated out my professional world from my recovery. Like, my vocation had nothing whatsoever to do with my recovery, but it just so happened that my climbing partner and one of my closest friends in sobriety, we kind of got kicking around this idea out here about how we could bring some of the same freedom we were finding through these athletic pursuits to other people who were struggling. And so as we started to outline it and figure out what it could look like, it became pretty obvious that it was going to be a full-time thing. So I very reluctantly left my job, because I had a great job and nice car and good health and took awesome vacations. And I left that in 2007 to start a nonprofit that had barely a year's worth of operating capital back, which was just our salaries.
Right.
and it's all kind of been, I guess, history from there. I've tried to get out. I tried to get out of it twice because sometimes it's a very heavy thing to do, to always be working inside of active addiction and with people who are at the front end. But each time when I went back out into, I guess, more traditional careers, I could never leave this. This is too raw. It's too real. It's too beautiful. And I have the chance to be with people in their greatest hour of need, which is a gift that I can't get anywhere else. So while I guess kind of came into it reluctantly, I could never do anything else.
See that? Look at that. So you wrote a book.
It's kind of like
No, go ahead.
So it sort of strikes me. I've been married for a bunch of years. I've been married for 17 years, and she's amazing, and I got it easy, so I don't give a lot of love advice. But the one thing I hear from my friends a lot, that who are single, and if they're out there looking, sometimes it seems like they don't always find what they're looking for, and it's frustrating and confusing, and it's not right. But as soon as they stop looking, it happens, and that's absolutely what happened to me from a career standpoint. Like, man, I was happy, I was cool, I thought I had everything I wanted, and then what I found out was there were other plans for me.
Yeah, that's the amazing thing about life, is like sometimes your calling comes to you. Even when you think that you're doing it. I'm fine, I'm great. But look at that. There's a bigger purpose for your life. So,
and then the difference between the people who I think take that calling and turn it into something remarkable, and the people who take the calling and it passes them by, are when the opportunity comes, man, it's not like it's going to be easy. Like, I had this knock on my door and I knew it was time, but, we put in 3 hours of 70 plus work weeks. I'm 3 years of 70 plus hour work weeks, and never worked harder in my life. Like, you still got to go for it. It's not like it's a gimme.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was going to ask you what the hardest part of your job is, working with, people who are recovering addicts. And you said that it was heavy, but is there anything else that's really hard about what you do every day?
Yeah, and I'm going to be super real with this too. The hardest thing for me is working inside of a field that in many ways has lost its north. There's a lot of nonsense inside of the treatment field that didn't exist even 10 years ago when we got into it. I've always been on the nonprofit side of things, but there's predatory behavior. There's taking advantage of drug addiction. There's treating people like commodities. And some days I feel like I see more of that than the good stuff. And for me, that's the hardest part, is seeing folks inside of my field that I bleed for, that I cry for, that I would do anything for. When I see people inside of this world treating it like a joke and taking advantage of people, that's the hardest part for me. It's not the stories and the addiction and the helping people out at the beginning. That's strangely rewarding.
Okay, so my next question was, what do you love the most about it? And you just said helping people and the stories. That's rewarding for you. Yeah. It's so
when you get that call, Nicole, and somebody is, listen, we all know addicts, right? We all know, and we've all unfortunately been close enough, but when somebody's at the end, and when I get to play any, whatever small role, even though it's never me, it's them, it's God, it's their families, but when I get to see them go from that kind of pain to the kind of joy that comes with knowing you've got a second chance, I don't know much more beautiful outside of family than that.
Wow, that's amazing. So you wrote a book, and your book is called Weed Inc., The Truth About THC, the Pot Lobby, and the Commercial Marijuana Industry. So tell us what the objective for the book is.
Education, plain and simple. I speak a lot all over the country, usually 40, 50,000 people a year, and a lot of it inside of my field. And it was really striking to me how little people knew about what was going on with weed today, with today's marijuana. We all think of the 70s and the 80s and 90s, and we've got this antiquated construct of it. And so I really set out to write something that would educate people on what's actually taking place today. And a huge part of that are these giant corporate big money interests that are changing this plant so rapidly, and I don't like them.
So can you explain to people what THC is? Like, just the simple layman's terms. What is THC?
It's the part of weed that gets you high.
Okay. All right.
There's 200 and some chemicals in the plant before you light it on fire, 500 and some after. The one that gets you high is called THC, and the one with the medicine in it is a non-mood altering, non-habit forming, non-psychoactive component called CBD. So CBD is the medicine, THC is the high.
Oh, look at you. You're jumping.
There we go.
You because that was my question. I had another question about CBD and you're already hitting my points before I get there. All right. So there are a lot of people that say that marijuana has a lot of health benefits and making it legal makes it more accessible to people who need it for the health benefits. What do you say about that? So what if that's someone's argument to what you're saying?
I think you can very easily agree with part of that statement without agreeing with all of it. And the part of the statement that I agree with is that there's definitely medicine inside of that plant. There absolutely is. But the area where people screw that up is they say, like, marijuana is medicine, and all those different chemicals and components in the plant, it's CBD is where the medicine is. It's like everything else in nature where there's a lot of stuff going on with it, like making aspirin from a hemlock. CBD is where the medicine is, and I think that we've got to change the vernacular on it so people aren't saying weed cures this. We can say a cannabis-derived medication is pretty phenomenal in this, because the misinterpretation that people make can be pretty dangerous. They look only at the good and never at the bad. And I think the people who are finding relief from cannabis-based medications and things, like, man, thank God for it. I think it's fantastic. I think the federal government ought to stop getting in the way of real research. And I think that we need to make that more widely available to the sick and suffering people who really need it.
Yeah. So I went to this Exotica thing that they had in New Jersey like a month ago or something like that. And at this show, they had like a counter where they were selling I don't even know what to call it now, but they had like gummies that I guess had marijuana in them. I don't know. I was trying to find something because sometimes I have like I can't sleep at night, insomnia. So I was telling the guy I need something that'll just help me sleep because I don't want to get addicted to ZQuil and Tylenol PM or whatever. So I'm just looking for something a little bit more natural. And I think he said he was trying to sell me this oil that cost $200. And I think he said it did not have THC in it. So it wouldn't make me like paranoid or anything like that. But I would just start to dream happy dreams and go to sleep or something like that. And it freaked me out. And I was like, no thanks. I'm not going to buy it. So that brings me to my next question. In your book, you say that there are a lot of THC infused products, coffee, ice cream, baked goods, cotton candy, and the list goes on. What are your concerns about the THC levels in these products and ingesting this kind of THC?
So traditionally in the past, edibles were just something that had a plant, an organic material, weed baked into them. And I actually gave like a real, not from personal experience, but what we're doing today is a concentrated THC specific oil. A lot of the times it can be something called canna butter that's actually like THC infused butter. There's a lot of different ways that you can extract it and then insert it into things that you can eat, but none of them are organic material, and they tend to pack a really wicked punch. So the easiest example for this is with the serving size. So the state of Colorado, and actually all the other states, have agreed that the maximum serving size per edible is 10 milligrams of activated THC. And so what we saw immediately here in Colorado, and every other state who's done similar, has been, this industry and these corporate interests and these companies decide that they can put multiple servings inside of one package. And so your gummy bear example, and here in Colorado, I mean, you can find gummy bears that have 10 legal servings per gummy bear. Mm-hmm. So 100 milligrams of THC, and that sort of thing's a problem. People can get themselves into trouble. Cannabis-induced psychosis is what it's called. They can get themselves into trouble by consuming that much.
Right. Yeah, because I mean, that just sounded crazy to me. They had like gummies, they had a whole bunch of different stuff. So now when they sell like the honey, and so that has THC in it, like you said, the butter. I've seen that before. And I thought, "Oh, some butter, like that's harmless." But I could probably be running around naked outside or something if I ate too much of that butter, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's actually like that exact thing is happening quite a bit here, and then a whole lot worse. And some of it's funny, but then it's not funny if somebody runs into a road. So cannabis-induced psychosis. We keep coming back to this idea and this tagline that nobody's ever died from weed. And well, you know what? Like in the same way, nobody's ever died from tobacco either.
Right.
But people die all the time from tobacco related, and people do dumb stuff when they get that high.
Yeah.
And when you consume that, yeah, cannabis butter can be really intense. And I think, like sometimes the terminology gets a little bit wild, but in all likelihood, if you're seeing something that's advertised as honey, it's a honey oil. Mm-hmm. And a honey oil is typically butane hash extracted THC oil. These concentrates, shatters, wax, dabs, they can actually have, so they can have up to 98% THC. They can be 98% pure THC. And to give you an idea, what naturally occurs inside of cannabis is less than 0.5% of THC.
See, and then when you think about it, I mean, look, do you remember when they said the Subway was using yoga mats in the bread? And that was like approved by, I don't even know who. Someone approved that we could eat that much yoga mat, we'd be fine. Right?
No, I don't.
You don't remember that?
You find at a fast food joint, doesn't it?
No, I swear. I'm going to have to look for that article and email it to you. Seriously. It was all over the news that Subway was using yoga mat in the bread. And it was approved by who approves that? Like they have like
the Food and Drug Administration.
Exactly, FDA. Yes, that they approved. They said it was okay. Like you could eat that much yoga mat and you'll be okay. So can you imagine with the same thing that you're saying? They say 10 milligrams, of activated THC, and then just put a little bit more. They'll be fine, right?
Right, and what's even a little scarier if people want to like try and have honest conversations about this stuff is there is even for the FDA to do something that crazy or like similar. There is no FDA involvement in this because it's a federal agency, and I kind of spell this out in detail in the book, but if there's any kind of, since it's a Schedule 1 narcotic, agree, disagree, whatever we want to about that, it is, any federal agency can't have anything to do with regulating it. So all these foods that are being prepared and these things that people are introducing into their bodies,
right.
FDA has no oversight into
right.
any of that. So you're putting in whatever the manufacturer felt like putting into it that day.
Right. That's no bueno.
No, and I mean, you saw the examples about the pesticides and about the molds and that it's kind of scary stuff.
Yeah, it's very scary. I mean, I didn't know this until I started reading your book, and then I was like, oh man, thank God I didn't buy that damn oil or those gummies. Like,
it's the difference between having something mass-produced in a large indoor commercial grow nursery and the dude who grows a couple plants out back for himself. Like, that's one, you're going to know what's on there, and if you choose to put on pesticides, fertilizers like growth accelerators, whatever, you know what it is. But the simple reality is with this, since there's almost no oversight, and since the faster it can grow and the more they can grow in one place, which means they got to kill mites and pests and funguses and all that, they can put whatever they feel like on it.
Yeah. So I feel like maybe legalizing weed is a little like when they legalized alcohol. Do you think it's different or do you think it's the same?
I think there's similarities and there's differences. So the similarities are that they're each vice substances that have both positive and negative effects associated with them. The difference is cultural acceptance and cultural interaction with. Like, mankind's been interacting with alcohol for millennium, like since the beginning of recorded history on a pretty large scale.
Mm-hmm.
And so to some degree, we have a better idea of how to interact with it. And then the other piece is we've got huge federal attempts, at least, at regulating. But the similarities then, and where I see the problems are, the reason why we haven't had an increase in alcohol taxes in 30-some years, and the reason why they so aggressively market in a lot of the ways that they do in poor communities, and is because there's this giant industry behind it that cares about nothing more than quarterly returns.
Yeah, and that's the problem. When the money is there, that's all that they focus on, and then everything else is like just falls by the wayside.
And that's my beef with this whole thing. You want to smoke weed, smoke weed. I don't care. Listen, I'm a drug addict. I don't get to throw stones or tell people what to do but what I really do care about, and what I've really got an issue with, and I wish people would pay more attention to here in my home state, and then when they're considering it in their homes, is the way that we have allowed the commercial market to manipulate us into thinking that this is cutesy little mom and pop stuff, free a plant and live and let live, when in reality this is another huge corporate takeover.
Yeah. So do you think they'll ever be able to figure out what kind of damage THC can do and at what level it becomes dangerous? Do you think if they did
yes.
some studies and really crack down on that, maybe it would make things a little bit better?
Well, so here's the issue with this is we know this, and if I were talking at a scientific convention right now, or if this was a forensic toxicology show or a psychiatry show, we could spend the entire time getting into the valid and solid research that we have about it, because there's so much of it. I mean, there are meta studies. There are studies that are summaries of so much relevant and valid scientific data that the only way to present it is by presenting huge findings at once. Like, there's a lot of information, but the problem is when you go to say that, people jump up and down and they say, well, you're crazy, reefer madness. You just want to send black and brown people to jail.
Mm-hmm.
And whoa, hang on. We're trying to talk about something that has real scientific foundation and evidence to it, but the conversation gets derailed a lot of the times by people who have, I think, ulterior motives, which is a lot of the times in the selling of it. But there's tons of information out there, both about the advantages and the disadvantages to it.
Have you ever seen anyone through your work that has suffered from an excessive amount of THC in their body?
Firsthand, multiple times. I worked at, I spent the last 5 years at the University of Colorado Hospital, and we had a specific drug and alcohol treatment program there, and so we were tip of the spear, and I have seen multiple times firsthand what cannabis-induced psychosis looks like.
Wow.
And that's the difference. If we're going to talk about the good, if we're going to talk about the advantages and here's some things we could get from CBD and here's some medicinal, like, fantastic. But just like any other drug, you guys, let's talk about some of the negative side effects that we see with this as well, so that we're not giving a distorted message to particularly the young people who think they can use as much as they want, as often as they want with impunity.
There are some guys like in the hip hop industry, and they smoke a lot of marijuana, and they seem very functional. How is that possible?
It's like any other drug in the world. There are people who can use it and remain functional, and there are people who, in like almost every drug, like heroin included, meth included, the majority of people who interact with it do not end up with these crazy examples of it. So it's not hard to find plenty of examples of people who are consuming quite a bit and then just moving on with their day. But with that, you also have to look at how it increases the chances of lots of specific things, and then how there are people who are not that lucky. And then remember, with celebrities and public figures, and all we're ever seeing usually is kind of what we're shown. And a lot of these folks have tried. Like I think of Snoop Dogg, and I think of the two very public attempts that he made to get sober and to get off of the weed, and how he couldn't do it. I think of Miley Cyrus and how she was such a huge advocate for it, and then she got sober, and now she loves talking about how much better her life is without it. Like, we've always got to try and look at a whole picture with it.
Yeah, absolutely. So what do you think would be a great compromise for legalizing marijuana?
So personally, I think, and this is a little bit more my thoughts than it is grounded in science and things, and I spelled it all out specifically in the book, and I'm actually currently working with a few states trying to help them put some laws together. I think that the solution is in decriminalization. I don't think that drug users should be criminalized, but I do think absolutely have to make sure that people who are selling things like this on a large scale don't have the ability to do it. So I've always liked the idea of decriminalization without giving the keys to the kingdom to these commercial interests. And so what I would do is have some real conversations about what it might look like. And again, I spelled out a lot of specifics in there in one of the final chapters, but how we could get to a place where nobody was ever getting arrested for, possession of small amounts. And we still didn't have, Philip Morris 2.0 coming in and just trying to make a buck off of us.
Yeah. All right. So, what else? What are your plans to continue to push your message forward? I heard you say that you were working on some law, like trying to get some laws pushed out.
Working with a couple of states who are trying to do it a little bit more thoughtfully, and my role in this whole thing, I think, there's a lot of people who go after the politics of it. There's a lot of people who kind of go after it at a different level than I am, and that's just not me. I'm not a politician. I'm not I think my role in this is to try to be a voice of reason and consideration on both sides of it, and to keep educating. And so I speak a lot on this subject, and it's and I'll keep writing on it. And it's not something that is particularly fun or glamorous, or if you go out into the world and you start questioning the wisdom behind the way we're taking marijuana, especially in my age group, and there's a lot of people who think that's incredibly not cool and all right to do, and you take a lot of arrows, but this is one of those deals that I feel like the stakes are high enough and the truth is important enough that I'm willing to take some of those arrows. So I'll just kind of keep on telling people what I know and trying to do it in a way that's accessible and not too, bland and dry and scientifically irrelevant a lot of the time.
What do you teach your children about drugs?
We talk about drugs so much in my house, and part of it's we live in Colorado and it's just everywhere, and weed's a great big joke to all the kids, and so what I do is I talk a ton about it, and that's what I tell all parents to do, is just have conversations about it. And then if you don't know something, say it, and don't try and represent that you do, and try and stay away from the absolutes and the black and white. So what I say to my kids more than anything else is that putting mood-altering substances into your body too early can be a really bad thing for you. And so you wait until your brain is developed to a point where they can process these, and that's usually 25, 26 years old. So we talk a lot about how all of these mood-altering substances, alcohol, marijuana, all the other illicit ones, how they're not for kids. And we talk a whole lot about how it's our job to try and look out for some of the people who are going to have it harder, like Dad did. and to help them out and to love them when they're doing things that seem hard to understand and unlovable. And so we try and talk a lot about how drugs are a problem, but people who use drugs need our love and need our compassion a lot of the times more than what they get out there in the world.
Yeah, because this new generation, they're like, if you listen to the music, it's like riddled with, oh, I was popping pills last night, I drank some syrup, I got high, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, all these songs are talking about this stuff, and it's just so crazy. Like, it's cool. So
I know.
It's just overwhelming. I mean, I have an 8-year-old and I'm just like, Lord, please, like, I don't know. So,
well, let me tell you what I think is like one of the things that I can give to my kids is, listen, my choice of sobriety, my lifestyle, that's mine. And I don't try and put it on anybody else, just like I don't want other people to try and force theirs on me. That's mine. Mm-hmm. And so I'm not telling my kids, you got to be totally abstinent forever, but I'm telling them they got to be abstinent now.
Right.
And I'm holding a hard line with that. And I'm also trying to get them to think about, because I think getting our kids to think is one of the greatest gifts we can give them. Like, what is it in the world today that makes everybody feel like they're not complete unless they're getting high, that they're not connecting unless they're getting high, that daily intoxication is the norm? And to me, I think like the root of, there's so much pain at the root of that. If we need to be numbing the way we feel every day and then making whole careers around singing about it, like, what is it that is making us think like that? Where are we not connecting personally and spiritually? And what would our life look like if we chose to live it differently than that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, do you have any other passions that you want to explore in the future?
Yeah. All of this to me comes back to how we help people stay connected. And for me, staying connected means that drug addicts have to get help. And so I think one of the biggest passions that I have is in advocating for solid, good, like real treatment for drug addiction. And that's where I guess I sort of see my career and my life going from here, is hopefully helping to continue to make an impact in the world and in the way that we approach the treatment of drug addiction and alcoholism.
So today, do you feel like you are living a purpose-driven life?
I do. And that's the greatest gift. It's not in that in your family. It's not in having a car, having a house, or all the things we think it is when we're kids. I have this gratitude in my life because I am able to do something that I feel like is meaningful on a daily basis, and living a life that I'm proud to live in front of my kids, and living a life that feels purpose driven is it's humbling and it's beautiful, and I feel like I'm right in the middle of what that is for me right now.
That is amazing. You are amazing, Ben. So,
I'll tell you what, if you met me, you probably wouldn't think the same. If you met my wife, you would probably think that.
No, she probably thinks you're amazing too. Cut it out. So let me ask you this. I always say that we don't pat ourselves on the back enough. So what are you proud of at this stage in your life?
I'm proud that I've stood up when not a lot of other people are standing up on something like this, because it's not too sexy.
Yeah.
And, for me, a lot of the times, real charity, real altruism, those are done when nobody knows that you did it. There's a verse in the Bible that says that when you give, your right hand shouldn't know what your left hand does. And I kind of like that of not doing any of it for the notoriety or for the glory so I'm proud that I feel like I'm standing up, yelling truth, when not a whole lot of people are engaging in this conversation from both sides, aren't engaging as honestly as I wish they would.
Yes, absolutely. So right now, I need you to tell me about your oh hell no moment, something that happened in your life, during your work, I don't know, on the bus, on the train, whatever, that made you say, oh hell no. Seriously? So you got to share an oh hell no moment.
I'm gonna move away from the weed thing specifically if I can. And,
sure, absolutely. It could be anything.
I had, and it's a heavy week because there's an anniversary in it, and I just lost a dear friend this week, and I was thinking and talking about this just yesterday with a buddy. I did a court-ordered outpatient treatment program with two guys. There were only three of us in it, and they ended up being as close as family. I mean, we partied before together, and then we got sober together, and neither one of them stayed sober. And they each died awful, violent deaths as a result of being intoxicated. And when the first one died, Jeremy was his name, in 1997, I thought to myself, oh hell no, this thing's not going to get me. This thing that is killing so many people I know and love, and taking the souls of people who I know and love, hell no, it's not going to get me. And when it gets hard, and when I want to give in, and when I want to get high, because I still, 21 years later, want to get high some days, like, hell no, it's not going to get me.
Wow, that's powerful. Well, I'm sorry for the loss of your friends, but you're here and you're carrying on, and that's amazing.
Hey, they're with me.
I'm sure they are. I'm sure they are. So again, Ben, you are amazing. You are another bright light shining here on earth, and we love you. I love people like you. I had someone on the show this week too. She's a psychologist, and she works with sexually abused women. Another amazing person. So really, you guys are doing amazing work, and you might not get, recognized for it all the time, but you should really know that what you're doing is amazing. Seriously.
I'll go to sleep thinking that, and I really appreciate it, Nicole. It means a lot to hear that. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing a little bit of your life and your story with the Oh Hell No podcast. We appreciate you.
Hey, thanks for reading the book. I'm glad you did. I appreciate it, and keep up the good work, huh?
Thanks, and tell us where we can get your book so other people can read it.
It should be in all bookstores and everything, and I know you can buy it on Amazon if it's not in your local bookstore, but hopefully it's at all the Barnes & Nobles and stuff, but you can find it right on Amazon, no problem. Okay.
Are you a social media person? Are you on any social media platforms? I know some people are like, So
I'm not. Like, I think I just was a tad. I'm 38, and so I kind of missed getting on at the beginning, and I've just never gotten there. I barely have enough time in life to keep up as it is. So I'm on LinkedIn, but I got a website if people want to say hey, or if all the people who I pissed off saying anything about weed want to say it's courtconsult.com for my consulting company. They're more than welcome to shoot me an email and tell me what an idiot I am, and I can share some science if you want it, or always happy to engage with folks who are maybe thinking about what sobriety could look like.
Yes, thank you so much. All right, Ben.
My pleasure.
Thank you.